All right, we are joined today by Judy with Free to Move and Play Physical Therapy. She is an amazing PT that I met along the way. She's helped me a lot in figuring out what I'm supposed to do when I grow up since Dominic passed away. And we're just so honored and pleased to have Judy here. So, Judy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. This is
Yeah.
such a treat. Yeah.
So I want to start by telling everybody that kind of our backstory. So
Mhm.
after my son Dominic died, I quit work for a while. I was working at a big um, pediatric hospital. And when I went back to work, I was trying to figure out, like, what am I supposed to do when I grow up, right? Like, what am I supposed to do now that I have this new stage in my life? And I drove by your place. You had a physical location, and I drove by your place, and I thought, I need to go talk to her. And so I like went and introduced myself and was like, hi, you don't know me, but can you help me? I think we're supposed to know each other. And you were so gracious and kind and kind of took me in. So thank you for that.
Uh, yeah, that was my little cute little place I had in Roanoke, that little house. I had half of the house. And yeah, it was so fun. Yeah, I wish I was at a place that I could just say, come work for me, but I just wasn't at that place of hiring anybody. But I'm so glad that we just became friends and colleagues. And gosh, just since I've started my practice a little over 3 years ago, I've just met so many cool, fun therapists, and you're definitely one of them. And I just like how we keep connecting. So
hmm Well,
it's
it
fun.
worked out perfect because I was supposed to be doing this, but I didn't know I was supposed to be doing this. And so I would send you these harebrained ideas, and you were so encouraging. So thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, you're welcome.
So, Judy is a pediatric physical therapist. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and your story in therapy and
Okay.
kind of what you're doing now?
Okay. Yeah. I have been a physical therapist for 30 something years. Don't know if I want to totally date myself, but I met my husband back in physical therapy school at Southwest Texas State many years ago. And one of my clinical rotations was in pediatrics. It was at Easter Seals in San Antonio. And I knew that I wanted to do pediatrics, but right after I graduated, we got married. I got pregnant that year, had 4 kids in 6 years. And so I was kind of working, but my mind wasn't on physical therapy as much as was having babies and, starting our family. So I didn't really start pediatrics. I was just doing home health and filling in at the local hospital in San Marcos with my husband. He's a PT. I think I said that. But anyway, so then it wasn't until years later when my youngest son was in second grade, I think. Anyway, I was going to just jump back onto working more than just contract. I was always kind of doing a little bit here and there, but I was ready to go back to a little bit more part time, full time. And so that was when I started my pediatrics journey. So that was about 21 years ago. So I've been doing pediatrics, I can say, for 21 years. I did other things that kind of helped with it. I started off doing adult neuro rehab with head injured patients. And so, we know that adult neuro rehab, in some ways with NDT, it's kind of similar to pediatrics too. So, um, anyway, yeah, so over those 21 years, I've done a lot of early childhood intervention. I worked for a program in East Texas for several years. And then I kind of started doing school district when my kids were all in school, and I needed I needed to be off by 3, and I needed to have, a schedule that worked with my family and all their, extracurricular. So I was a school physical therapist for about 6 years, different school districts I contracted with full time at Tyler. And then, and then I jumped back into some outpatient and done a lot of pediatric home health, and then moved to the DFW area of Fort Worth a little over 8 years ago. And I got back in with ECI. So I was with the ECI program in Tarrant County and did that. And then 3 years ago, it was literally 2 months before the pandemic hit. My youngest daughter moved back home and was going to be here 3 months in between jobs, and that turned into 2.5 years. But I had started thinking about starting my own practice. I even had the name picked out, everything. but we just decided to do it. We just jumped into it. And so, so I started Free to Move and Play a little over 3 years ago. And yeah, I don't want to say it's been this, breeze walk. It hasn't. It's been hard. I feel like I was so naive about small business, private practice, all of that, insurance. There was so
Yeah,
much I
tell
did.
us a little bit about insurance, because a lot of parents, they go to these big clinics and they take insurance, but coming from a small clinic or an independent clinic, what does that look like? I know you've shared a little bit with me about that, but can you tell us kind of that journey with insurance? And a lot of private therapists are private pay, and so maybe explain why that is.
Right, right. Um, yeah, I literally didn't know what I was doing when I started the practice with insurance. But the other therapists that I knew that kind of mentored me a little bit, and that I could, make those phone calls, and they would talk me through starting my own actually LLC practice, whatever. Everybody just did insurance. So I figured, oh, that's what I need to do. Nobody can afford to pay private pay, right? So me and my daughter just figured out how to get credentialed. It's a 3 to 6 month process, even just getting on with the insurance companies. So I got on with all the major ones. I don't know how we did it, but we figured it out, and, started seeing kiddos and started getting, my checks from them. But the reality is, when you're in network as a therapist, you sign a contract with them for, whatever, a year, 2 years, and they have contracted rates that you're agreeing to what they're going to pay you per visit, per session, per units, whatever. They're all a little bit different, but literally the contracted rate for in-network providers is even less than half than what our billable charges are, what we're charging. And so that was news to me. I didn't know, so the reality, I think, for a small practice getting started, the only way that I think you can really survive and keep paying the bills and keep your doors open is you have to see a lot of kids, because you need
Mm-hmm.
a lot of visits to, to get paid, to pay the bills and stuff. And so
To
I don't
counteract
know.
those reimbursements, right? So that's why like these big clinics can take insurance, because they have a ton of therapists billing for
Yes,
hours, and so it
exactly.
kind of levels out. But I mean, you
Exactly.
literally couldn't, with those rates, you can't pay the rent or pay your professional dues or pay, just
Yeah.
keep your practice up, and documentation systems, all that stuff. There's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into it.
Exactly. And I think I kind of knew that just this season of my career, it's not like I was wanting to grow this big practice. I really wanted to just provide quality custom care for kiddos. And I just felt like, I loved ECI, I loved outpatient home health in some ways, but, all the red tape and all the meetings and all the extra stuff you had to do in addition to just your PT notes and evaluations, I was just like, this is eating up so much time. And I think I truly, I mean, I I did, but I don't know if that's, I think it's probably why a lot of therapists get burned out, because the
Mm-hmm.
productivity demands are so high. And then on top of that, you have all this administrative stuff, and you're trying to, follow all the rules of the policies and all of that. No, that I just,
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
a
well,
real thing. I mean,
yeah,
especially when you've been in practice for so long and you have so many unique and excellent skills, if you're it's just like you're doing the same thing for 20 years and it burns you out. So a lot of
yeah,
therapists that can get these like very individualized skills are going towards this, because that way they can really provide custom, direct, one-on-one therapy.
exactly. And it took me a year. So I did insurance for a year and a half, and managed to keep my doors open, and just was just trying to figure out, like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I never really thought I was going to go private pay, but then I just started meeting people that were doing that, and I just kind of took the leap of faith with that. And the families that I was seeing at the time, I gave them about 3 months notice, letting them know that I was going to be going out of network, and it takes that long to even get off of insurance. It's not like they release you right away either. You're in this contract too. So, but you know what? It felt right. And even some of my parents that were, so used to just, me filing for them in network, all of that, they stayed on with me. And, the reality is I'm kind of finding out when you're out of network as a provider, sometimes these insurance companies are paying the full rate and they're reimbursing the families. And so case in point, I just had a family that I did in 2-week intensive with her 2 kids, 2 siblings. We got a grant that paid for part of their DMI intensive that I did with them, not all DMI, but physical therapy plus DMI. And she just let me know a month after that she got reimbursed for the rest of the intensive out of network by me just giving her my super bills. And I was like, that's amazing, but that's interesting. They're paying full for out of network, but for in network, they're still paying all the deductibles and premiums, all of that. The providers are getting half, and they're still, I don't know, something's not right with the system, but I don't
half on a good day. Well, and the thing is too, insurance really dictates, if you're going the insurance model, it's going to dictate what you can provide. I'm a part of a lot of different therapy groups, a lot of independent practice groups, and everyone's always like, you have to document things just right, because if insurance, the person reading and approving if your child gets therapy,
yeah.
if they're not therapists a lot of times, they don't know. And so it's like you're playing this game and they can just decide like, okay, this kid doesn't need any more. And you're like, no, this kid does. So, it's really empowering the families. You can get reimbursed. Let's do therapy based on your needs versus what the insurance company says. That's a whole nother discussion, right? Overhauling the insurance. Okay.
But
So
that's where I'm at now, and it's, it's working great. And I'm so glad I switched to private pay. Honestly, I feel like I'm doing more of exactly what I want to be doing. So it's working out.
yeah, well, good.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your therapy approach? Maybe just give some education to everybody out there who maybe don't know, you're going to throw out some terms. So explain what those terms are. Kind of
Okay.
what approach do you currently take?
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit of a hodgepodge. I think back when I started pediatrics, I was trained in NDT, which is great. That's the neurodevelopmental treatment approach that, has been around for a long, long time. That, has kind of been our basis for pediatrics, I think, for a long time, which is great.
We all
But
learn that in school.
yes, yeah, in PT
Yeah.
school, that's basically, I think, what I learned in pediatrics was NDT. I never went on to get fully certified, but I did different NDT courses and stuff. So, and trained under some great therapists using it too. But I have to say, gosh, just in the past 2.5 years since I started Free to Move and Play, I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram and all the social media, but I have to say I've met some amazing colleagues that are kind of doing the same thing I'm doing, that you're doing. We're kind of just creating a new path. And I feel like I've added a lot more new things to my toolbox that is what I'm doing, which is my approach now. So yeah, I'm one of the, I'm level C trained in DMI, which is dynamic movement intervention, that are not neurotypical, are finding out what DMI is too. So it is a treatment strategy that is amazing. And the research is coming, the clinicals and all of that are coming, but the results, it's based on solid approaches, and it works, I have to say. So I'm using a lot of DMI.
Can you tell us a little bit about DMI and what that is? So
Yes.
I'm only level A DMI. You're C. So you've been doing it a lot longer than I have. So can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, DMI stands for dynamic movement intervention. So it is a treatment approach, for kids. So it's basically, one of the big things it's based on is neuroplasticity. So we are trained in, so level A, there's like 30 exercises that you learn. Level B, another 30, 35. Level C, another 30, 35 exercises. Some of them are similar, but there's variability with them. And so it's similar to NDT because we're actually treating the child developmentally. We would call it cephalocaudal, so proximal to distal, head down. So you're working on head control first, then trunk control, and sitting, transitions, rolling, crawling, kneeling, and then working up to standing, walking, dynamic standing, dynamic balance activities too. So you start with the child with where they're at and what is the functional level, what is the skill you're wanting to work with them on: independent sitting, holding their head up, standing alone, taking steps, whatever. So yeah, so we're taking them through exercises that is it, a lot of it, the two we're giving them, this is a lot to explain to you, so I hope I'm
It's a lot. You're doing great. You're doing
but
great.
we're kind of basically, we're giving them sensory postural input. A lot of it's proprioceptive and vestibular. And then we're not just doing it to them. It's not passive stuff we're doing. We set them up in a position, in a movement where then we pause, we wait, and we want an active motor response from them. And
Give them
so,
those tactile cues. Yeah.
yeah. So it can be with somebody who even cognitively or is not talking or is low level, globally impacted, but we're also just, putting their body in the position that we're working a lot of postural control against gravity. We're giving those tactile input. We're giving, vectors of how we're kind of facilitating them then to activate a motor response, whether it's to maybe, from tall kneeling, we're setting them up then to move into half kneeling and to push up to standing, or we're helping them through a transition from supine to sit, and we're taking them through and we're wanting them to participate. And then you're with the repetition, neuroplasticity, it is you're training the brain to create new synapses and to help them to make a skill become a little bit more automatic, and so we're kind of it's definitely working with the muscles, and we're working against gravity, and we're working their postural muscles, but we're also tapping into the brain to know how to do this movement in the correct alignment. So there's a lot of things I love about DMI, but I love the postural alignment we're working in. I love the input, the vestibular proprioceptive input we're giving them. And I love the response that we're wanting, that it's the actual functional movement that's going to help them, and it's going to translate into them being able to work on a new skill on the floor or whatever level, functional level they're at. So
one of the things that, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's my version of DMI. I've been doing it probably a year and a half now. So anyway, I'm still learning, but yeah.
Yeah, it's great. One of the things that every pediatric therapist uses gravity in different ways, but one of the things I loved about the educational piece that we receive as therapists when we're going through DMI training is it's a way to organize our approach. Like we all intuitively use gravity in different ways for strengthening exercises, but I liked how it organized the approach of using gravity in different developmental phases. Does that make sense? I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
And like any great pediatric therapist, this is a tool in our toolbox. And so I find a lot of parents who are just learning about DMI, it looks super impressive on social media and on YouTube. You're floating kids. Well, really, you're just putting them in a gravity reduced kind of position to help them to achieve that. But as therapists, we all have a bunch of tools, and so if you have a nail, you need to use a hammer, not a screwdriver. And I love how, because you're so experienced and so well-rounded, DMI is a tool that you use, but you use lots of other tools that you've gained over all of your years of experience. So what are some of the other tools? I know TASES is one thing that you use. Is that right?
I started my TASES journey just this past year too. So I've been like, I don't know, 4 or 5 of the TASES courses. I'm about to do the upper extremity in November. So then I think I'll complete all of my TASES. So yeah, it's functional, electrical, neuromuscular stimulation. So I have to admit, functional electrical stimulation in the past for me, like I don't think I had the training, and I really kind of knew what I was doing with it. But with TASES, it's kind of like DMI too, as far as for functional electrical stim. It's kind of organized it for me, and it's given me a real purpose. And I know exactly what kids I want to use it with too. So if those muscles need an extra firing, so I use it even in combination with some DMI, exercises too. So,
so the
what
basis
I
for
love
that.
about what I love about DMI and TASES is they're kind of like, this is not the only thing, but it works well with other treatment strategies, so
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of just kind of, yeah, we always, as therapists, every session we have to make a decision on how we're going to spend our time, how much time do we have to do it. But I feel like I have some great tools now just with DMI and TASES to make some good decisions on how do I really set this child up for success for practicing and working those muscles and working the brain, at the same time. So yeah, I love TASES too. I feel like I'm still on a growth path with that. And then I had done TMR maybe about a little less than 2 years ago, total motion release. But I have to say with TMR, I only did the TOTS and teen level 1. So I didn't go very far with that. But it definitely gave me a whole new perspective of how I do stretching with kids now. So I have to say, to clarify with TMR, I use probably more the positional release stretching part of it and maybe not the activation. I probably use it more for stretching. The activation, I say I'm probably doing more DMI and some other type strengthening with it. But it's definitely changed my approach of the trunk and trunk restrictions for my torticollis babies. And then even kids that are, whether they're low tone or high tone or whatever's going on, there's sometimes, you have those trunk restrictions and it affects what you can do with them. So using the TMR positional release trunk moves, I use that a lot as well. I'll usually start off a session with that, and I love using hypervibe, which is whole body vibration.
Mm-hmm.
I just upgraded to the hypervibe. I'd use just a cheaper whole body vibration. Anyway, I don't want to say cheaper and name the brand that it is, but it
Yeah,
is less
yeah. We know
expensive.
what you mean.
But I
Off
feel like
label.
hypervibe has the therapy frequency research behind it, that it works a little bit better for muscle strengthening and decrease, reducing tone too. So that's why
It's
hyper vibe.
it's interesting. So every 2 years, like all therapists, but we're PTs, so we're going to talk PTs. Every 2 years, we're required to take a lot of continuing education to keep our license active. And
Mm-hmm.
so, when people are looking at therapists and like, are you a DMI therapist? Well, yes, but I also have 19 years of all kinds of courses I've been taking
Right.
that we have to. So you're just building on your knowledge base, and that's one thing that I want families and parents to understand is, well, yes, I do this as a tool, but also have all these other years of experience that I'm bringing to the table here.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Yeah.
when I had my son Dominic, when he was here, we did, obviously lots of therapy, but I had never even heard the word intensive. And now this is like the thing to do. So it is showing great progress. It's getting popular for a reason. Can you talk a little bit? And I know that you use intensives in your practice. Can you talk a little bit about that model and the kind of progress that you're seeing with it?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it probably is because of DMI and going a little bit further with that. Right before I went to my level C in Arizona in April, I made the decision a couple months before that I was going to start working towards intensives. I had a couple colleagues that were already doing intensives, DMI, TASES, and were encouraging me to go that route. But so yeah, so an intensive is more where you're offering daily therapy. So maybe for 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, every day, 5 days a week. And I think it kind of varies. I'm doing 2 hour ones. But I'm customizing it. So now I've had some families recently that we're doing 90-minute sessions because 2 hours was just a little bit long, even with the break for the child. But little kids can handle it. But it's also DMI. So my intensives, I wouldn't say they're DMI intensives. I'm using DMI in addition to hypervibe, TASES, TMR2. Sometimes it is probably 70% DMI and some other tools too. But I'm not, some people do just DMI intensives as well. But yeah, so it's just offering, just more intensive. So you're just going every day instead of weekly therapy, which is typically once or twice a week for maybe an hour session, 45 minutes. And that also is important. But I think for me, since I've started doing that, I feel like you can accelerate a little bit of maybe a skill you're working on because you're getting in the repetition. So you're tapping into the neuroplasticity. They're getting the practice. And then you're also, I feel like then after the week or 2 or 3 weeks, I'm sending the parent home with a really good home exercise program, either with the DMI exercises that I feel comfortable with them doing at home, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just some of the functional skills or whatever, but I just feel like this is what you can do to really kind of work on this skill. And it's working well. I do weekly therapy still too, but it's also, I'm finding people that have done the intensive sessions are now coming back for weekly visits, just wanting to continue once a week or twice a month, just to continue with maybe the DMI instruction if they don't have another therapist that's doing DMI or whatever I've been working on with them too. So yeah, I'm still, what so I've been doing them since March, so it's kind of new to me, and I've done the gamut. Now I've done week-long, 2-week ones, 3-week ones too. And I do, I am trying to customize them too. So I'm kind of finding my rhythm with that, but I can't say I've found the holy grail with intensives for me yet. So I'm still, but the key is, so I'm available and I can work with your schedule with your child, and let's customize, an intensive session that, might just really might just be a piece in the puzzle of the therapy they're already getting, that might just give you some new tools and help them to, progress. I think some places have kind of claimed that you can, do a 2 or 3 week intensive and they might achieve a skill that would take a year in weekly therapy. I don't know where the research or, where we're getting that to be able to say that. But I know that I've had several parents say, wow, they've never done that before, or they've never, I've never seen them, stand alone. I've never seen them, and that happens a lot with DMI because maybe we're challenging them a little bit more than they've been challenged before too. So, and I'm
right.
not trying to put down any other therapist doing weekly or other skills or not using DMI, but yeah, it's been kind of working. It's been kind of fun to take, like
Yeah.
you said, my
It's
years
a
of experience, new strategies, putting them together. And I want I want the research, I mean, yeah, we want, what is it called? Everything used to be evidence-based,
evidence-based. Yeah. I mean,
evidence.
the thing is, though, as therapists, you can be up to date on all of the newest research, and you should be. But at the same time, clinically, functionally, when you're with kids, you have to see what works with that kid and then
Mhm,
apply that, even if there's not a ton of research behind it. Well, this
right.
kid responds really well to this. And, of course, we
Sure.
all are using neuroplasticity. We're all using uh, all those strategies and everything that we know to be true, but
Yeah.
doing it in different ways. And I feel like there is a lag, especially with like insurance paying for intensives. I've heard this from some pretty big health plans, that there's not research for it. And so, I'm like, well, the research is coming, everything starts, and then the research will follow. So,
Right. Right.
um,
But
yeah.
I
And
think, go ahead.
go ahead. I was
I
just
was
saying, you're working on one thing in an intensive, you might be, our goal for this week is head control or independent sitting. And so you're getting, like you said, you're getting those reps in, and you're going to be more likely to make progress faster because you're able to do it for 2 hours a day for a week versus 1 hour twice a week, like,
Mm-hmm.
typical therapy.
Right. And I'm finding parents that are doing intensives, they're seeing the results with it too. And I think there's a lot of money starting to spring up through nonprofits and foundations to kind of ease the gap of where insurance isn't paying for it. But they're also like, I want what works for my child too, So I wonder if this is going to just affect how insurance looks at this, because a lot of parents are willing to pay private pay for intensives and do that and get some assistance. And like my mom, she's getting reimbursed out of network for it. And who would have known, that they would pay for it too. So, I mean, as therapists, then we need to just be honest with them. This is what I'm providing. This is what I'm doing. But I use a pretty good what is it, EMR, electronic, whatever,
Medical record.
record system. So I can provide really good super bills, to them, and then they can, so we should be able to do that for them to help them as much as possible to submit what they need to. But I think parents want results, and they want to really know that I'm doing the most I can for this child as far as therapy. And one of my things with early childhood intervention, ECI is a great program, and natural environment is a great theory, and for young kids and stuff. And I love going into the homes and stuff too. But I think the reality was I wasn't doing enough therapy for these kids, the parents that needed it, especially those that were more neurologically involved. And, coaching is great. Parent coaching is great, but they also need a therapist that knows how to handle their child, knows how to show them those. And sometimes just that model, I just felt like these kids needed more and better therapy. But I'm not, putting down ECI, but that was just me,
Of
where
course.
I felt like I'm not doing enough. And now I feel like I'm doing the most I can be doing. So I
Right.
love that.
One of the things that I want to talk about is, when I had a medically complex kid, for 8 years, he did therapy his whole life. And it gets to be, and I hear a lot from parents about therapy burnout, and I'm a big advocate for therapy breaks. And I feel like one thing that social media has done is social media is your highlight reel. You don't put your really bad days on there. You put your great days, so it makes you look great. And so, they're constantly being bombarded because when therapists have a practice, they're going to put their patients up there that they're working with that are making great strides. They're not going to post the kid that they've been working on sitting for a year, and the kids, because that's not a highlight reel, right? Like, even though that kid's valuable and all that, it's just the way business works. And I've come into contact with some parents who are just seeing all day, they see these kids making these great leaps and bounds, and it's really affecting their mental health because their kid developmentally is just not at that level. And so one thing I wanted to talk about was the importance of therapy breaks, the importance of not comparing your child and your family to everybody else. And, there's got to be this balance of getting the therapy your kid needs and also meeting the needs of you and your partner, your spouse, and your marriage, and the rest of your kids and your family. And then if, some conditions you can gain a lot of progress, and some conditions you just can't. Like my son, I think I posted years ago, he sat up for like 15 seconds by himself. That's the longest he ever sat up by himself. He was 8 years old. And that was like, that was as far as he got. And that was a huge deal for us. But I think at that point, if I were following all these accounts that were showing like, all this amazing progress, it would have put me into depression. So I do tell parents sometimes, I'm like, we need to unfollow some of those accounts. You need to realize this is a business people are running. But yeah, have you run into that at all with parents where they're just feeling like they can never do enough, and you're like, you need to take a break. You need a therapy break. Everyone needs a therapy, because therapies, you could do it forever if you wanted to. And then people are doing intensive sometimes once a month. And I know when I was in the DMI course, they said, once a quarter is what they recommend.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Have you ran into that at all?
Yeah, no, that's so great that you're bringing that up, especially kids that are, medically complex, very neurologically involved too. As therapists, we need to also just, yeah, be talking about the realistic, and what are your expectations? What are your goals? And yeah, and so I set up a Zoom call a week before we start the intensive. Usually it's a couple months process of with somebody, making the initial call and deciding if it's a good fit and putting down their down payment anyway. And then we do a Zoom call and I try to meet the child through Zoom if it's somebody I've never worked with before. And then I talk through the parents, what are they doing? What is his therapy or his or her therapy like? What have they been doing? What is the progress you've been seeing? Or what, and then also we just talk about if we're coming for a week or 2 weeks, what are your goals? What are your expectations? What are you, because I feel like, yeah, for the intensives, a lot of people are finding me because of Instagram too now, or maybe being on the DMI, list of practitioners or whatever, for intensives, maybe not just for weekly therapy. Yeah, and that's great. One thing I like about intensive when they come to see me, I feel like I can really get to know this child and the mom better because I'm not just seeing them once a week or whatever. I feel like even if it's just for a week, 2 hours a day, I'm really, by day 2, I feel like, okay, I have an idea here. I'm getting to really, work with them too. And I've just gone by what I've heard other people recommend. So I just say, no, intensive is not real life therapy. This is an intensive, and we decide on what the goal or expectation is and what I'm going to send you home with. But then they need their weekly therapy. And I wouldn't do I recommend 3 weeks. Some people say 6 weeks in between. Sorry, 3 months. Some people say 6 weeks, but I've already had a couple booked like 3 or 4 months later too, and that kind of worked out well and having therapy in between. So yeah, that's a great point, because their whole life shouldn't be therapy. It should be therapy as one aspect of this child's life, and it was a wake-up call for me. I did an intensive a couple weeks ago. It was just a week long. They traveled from out of town, so we did every day for 2 hours. And when I sent the mom home with the home exercise program written out, we had a lot of videos of her doing some of the exercises, me, so she was set up to go. And she texted me 2 or 3 days later and she said, I just ran through the whole home exercise program and he's exhausted. I was like, I am so sorry. I don't mean you to be reduplicating my intensive sessions. And then so I just said, no, you pick 2 or 3 of these during a play awake time with him. Maybe spend 20 minutes of focus, doing it. But no, I am so sorry I didn't communicate. You can't do this program with them every day. They need a break, they need
Right.
to, but I'm giving you some tools to incorporate into his play routine on the floor that you could help him with. But 20 minutes, maybe twice a day, maybe once a day, just depending. But oh, no, 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 you're not recreating what I did for 2 hours every day. Who can live like that? That's, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
it's just too
we can
much.
think like we have magic hands and we have the magic things that we just taught you to do, but that's not real life.
Right.
You
Right.
need to
Yeah.
be living and not.
Living should come.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think I heard you on something recently on your Instagram where you just said sometimes, especially with kids that are, it's long-term goals, and it's slow progress. And yeah, it's like by all means, if you're just burnt out, your child's tired and you're take a break. You probably know enough just to be working on a few things on your own, and it's okay to take
Well,
a
I think you shouldn't work on things on your own if you're taking a break, to be honest. Like,
oh, okay. Yeah.
Dominic was 8. And so because I'm a therapist, as soon as we came home after our first 4 months in the hospital, he started all the therapies. And then at a certain point, his PT who I handpicked. I called the company and I said, I want you to send me the oldest therapist you have. If you send me a new grad, I'm not letting her in. I was a little bit high strung back then because he was so complex, like, and he just needed someone who'd been around. And so they sent me this amazing therapist who was, she was licensed before I was born. And I was like, that's who I want. Anyway, she worked with him for a really long, 5 years. And then she retired. And it wasn't until she retired that I was like, oh, like maybe we don't need to keep doing PT. Like, even though I am a PT, maybe we don't need to keep doing this. And like just taking a hard look at his progress and what do we actually functionally, what's realistic? Because when he was little, I didn't know what he was going to do. I was trying to figure out how are we going to have him walking, carrying his ventilator. Like I was trying to figure out contraptions for that,
Yeah.
and he never walked.
Yeah.
But I just, even though this was my job, I wasn't able to look at him and see what his functional level was going to be. So then we stopped doing PT because I was like, well, I mean, I can't replace her. Who am I going to go to? And then I realized, for him, for us, that was okay. So we started doing horseback riding, hippotherapy. We still had OT that came, and we had speech because we were working on communication and stuff. But that was the first time I realized that it was okay not to do all three all the time for his whole life. And I feel like that's a big realization that I want parents to have, that therapy is there to improve an aspect of your life. And then it's okay to take a 3-month break or a 6-month break or even a year break and just live. And then if there's something you need to work on, get back into it, or, go to an intensive or whatever.
Right, right. No, that's so wise and so true. And I feel like as therapists, yeah, we need to be tuned into, yeah, and sensitive to not just what we're doing with that child in therapy, but what's going on at home and the parent and just it's a whole picture there, and it's not just our DMI session or it's that is so
Yeah.
true. Yeah. So
I always tried to reconcile when we were in the NICU after he was born. There was a therapist that I worked with, and she was older. She was very wise, wonderful woman, and she came over because she knew my personality, and I'm like all in, right? And she came over and she like looked at me in the eyes, and she goes, "You are not your son's therapist." And I was like, I just like looked at her, and she repeated it like 3 times. "You are not his therapist. You are his mother." And I was like, okay. And I took that to heart. And so I didn't do therapy on him. If the therapist told me to do something, I would do it. But other than that, I totally was just like, that's right, I'm the mom. And
Mhm.
so I think that balance too. I mean, it was harder for me because I'm a little bit controlling and also a pediatric therapist. That's what I did for my job. But having those moms just realize that like the weight of the world doesn't have to be on your shoulders all the time. If the therapist says only do this 5 minutes a day, then only do it 5 minutes a day. If you're going to kill yourself and kill your kid
Yeah.
doing therapy so much, like I don't, it's too much sometimes. I'm not against therapy. Obviously this is what I do for a career, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. There's just that balance there that I feel like doesn't always exist, that I feel like we need to try to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe parents that are starting to do more intensives too are realizing an intensive is an intensive, and you're not going to be recreating that too. And even if I have somebody more than a week long, I'll send it home that week. And I said, don't do anything this weekend. We've done a lot this week. Just you don't have to do, they need a break too. Their body is working really hard too. And so don't feel like you have to, yeah, do
Yeah,
sessions
that's such a balanced approach.
over the weekend too. So yeah, I think I mean, as therapists, we just need to, yeah. And I think that does come with experience and age, the more you've worked with them too. And so, and hopefully, yeah, what we're posted on Instagram too, because I'm doing reels as well too. And I think it's helpful because people are learning about maybe DMI or intensives and seeing that, but hopefully there's the gamut of children at different levels, so you're seeing just how exciting it is with somebody who is holding their head up for 3 seconds, versus a child who is stepping in and out of a box for the first time, with just being held by ankles. So it's kind of like, I hope there's that whole gamut of every child's different, and not everybody's going to achieve the same, what somebody's potential for their highest functional level is going to look different for every child. So hopefully, yeah, we need to be responsible with that too, that we're not, because you're right, it is, the reels are the exciting ones. We saw progress, and you want to show the progress,
Hmm.
day 1 versus day 4. But the reality is there's a lot of times where no, we're working through this, and this is still hard. And and maybe we don't have that evidence, physical evidence, but we know that it's helping, and it's, but that's so good. But that's that's the whole thing with, right? I mean, social media, we
Yeah,
definitely have to be responsible with it. Yeah. So
I know it's hard. It's hard, but and then you got to put the fun music to it and the trending music, and
yeah,
uh, it's
yeah,
a whole new thing. It's a whole new thing. Is
yeah.
there any advice that you would give to parents who are just starting out, who've never done an intensive, or just, I don't know, anything that's kind of on your heart that you feel like I would really like people to know this? I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I did not prepare you for this.
Okay,
So,
no, that's good. I guess kind of what we talked about earlier too. I would also not let insurance, dictate what you're doing with your child. I think there's other ways. I mean, you might find a great therapist that's with insurance in a big clinic, and that's great, too. But also, I think maybe, kind of research, talk to parents that have kids that are maybe working through similar challenges of your child, get in those support groups or whatever, and then just find out what's been helpful. And I think like what you're doing too, for parents that have medically complex kiddos, what you're going to be providing is going to be I would say get in something like Blue Bee Collective, where you can talk with other parents and talk with Chastity, who's a therapist plus has, had a child as well too. And so you've walked both spectrums and still are walking it as a therapist too. But so it's like, get the support you need that way. And then, as far as, I don't know, I would just, I mean, even somebody that has a flashy Instagram page and they're doing all this, cool DMI or whatever, they may not be the right therapist either, too. Things can be, but I also feel like sometimes it's helpful to see what somebody's doing. It gives you a picture of, maybe some of their legitimacy too. But yeah, just, I don't know if you're asking just about, it's not just about finding, but
oh
advice, but
yeah, no, whatever
finding
you wanted to
right.
say.
Also, have those, call and talk with them and just get a feel for, what would therapy look like, with you, and, what would that eval look like, and what, when do you recommend, should I do an intensive or should I do weekly or whatever. I think you need to find therapists that are willing to kind of talk with you, and you feel like, I mean, experience is huge. I get what you're saying about how you said, I just wanted the oldest therapist for my child. I think I would probably do the same thing, but new grads need experience, but I feel like new grads need good mentors, and they need to be under therapists that are, they have accountability too with what they're doing as well. But I don't know, just find a good fit for you with that therapist and your child. And don't just, I'm just, there's so many creative ways to pay for things now that don't feel like you're limited to just what insurance is telling me. Because I know one of the big networks, I won't name who it was, but they live, sometimes their plan that the child was on, this child was very neurologically involved, medically complex. And I think the insurance gave them 24 PT and OT visits a year combined.
Combined.
Speech was unlimited. So, we were wanting therapy at least, before I was doing intensive twice a week. So PT and OT twice, that ran out pretty quick,
Oh yeah,
and
in like a month or whatever. I mean,
then
we deal with
it's,
this all the time as therapists. I'm like, this kid needs a lot of therapy. We can make huge changes. She's going
yeah,
to, it's neurologically progressive. Oh, we all three have to share 60 visits. PTOT speech has
yeah,
to share 60 visits a year. Like, how in
yeah.
the world are we going to do that? It's
Yeah.
insane, really, when you get on that side of it.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say you find the therapist that you want to go with and then figure out how it's going to work out and get paid for, because there's ways to do it, so I just feel like it's important for you not just to be feeling like I have to follow all the rules of what is allowed or not allowed. No, I think you need to, what kind of therapy do you want for your child right now? How much do you want? What do what is
mhm.
realistic? What can you work into your home family schedule? And then there's ways to kind of make that work. So that's
Yeah.
what I
And finding a therapist, I always tell my clients, my therapy clients and my Blue Bee clients, um,
would.
that it's okay to try people out. And so I always say, like, for my therapy clients, I have to fit good with you. Like, you have to feel like I fit good and I have to feel like you fit good. And
Yeah.
we have to have this mutual understanding. And if we don't, that is totally okay. I will
Yes.
never get my feelings hurt if you say, I just don't feel like this is the best fit. I actually had that before. I had a client scheduled. We talked on the phone a couple times, and then they ended up calling and just being like, I don't really feel like this is the best fit. And I'm like, I'm so glad that we found that out now versus
Yeah.
being 2 months into the therapy relationship. And then I wasn't able to meet the needs that you had, or vice versa. And then we felt like we lost time.
Yeah.
So it's always okay for parents to like
So good.
call and talk to the therapist. It's easier too with people in private practice because it's easier to get to them. Sometimes when you call a clinic, the front staff is like, you can't talk to the therapist, but
Hmm.
just it's okay to move on. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings if it's not fitting your needs.
That's so good. And especially for intensives, if we're talking on the phone and they're giving me, the information that I need to kind of screen through to see if they're appropriate too. And if we're still not sure and I'm not sure they're not, and it's feasible, I'll say, well, why don't you just kind of come in for an initial eval and let's just meet. Let me just see your child in person. You can meet me. You can see where I'm doing my sessions. And there's been a couple times where I was like, I don't think an intensive, is going to work here. But if anyway, so I'm just honest with them that way. And then I'm okay too, even after that phone call or coming in or doing a Zoom call. And then they just opt not to. Then I'm like, oh, that's so fine. It's totally
Yeah.
okay.
Do not take
And
it
so you need a
personal.
therapist that you feel like you can just, yeah, just to exit if it's not a good fit. Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Can you tell people how they can reach you? Maybe your website, Instagram.
Yeah, yeah. So I am Free to Move. It's Free to Move LLC is my business. My doing business as is Free to Move and Play. So I have a Instagram page, Free to Move PT, and then in my link in my bio has my website. Even just to, if you want to contact me through my website or phone call or email. So, and then my website is just freetomoveandplay.com. So, and yeah, when you call me, you'll get me on the phone. So
Awesome.
I'm
Yeah,
just
that's
small business. So
invaluable.
my daughter
Invaluable.
helps me, but I'm doing it all. So I love it. So, yeah, I will be able to talk with you. Yep.
Well, you've given us a lot of resources, and I really appreciate your time. I know you're super busy with therapy clients, so I'm going to let you go so you can catch your next kiddo, and hopefully we'll have you back on.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Chastity. And I
All
love what
right.
you do with the Blue Bee Collective. I think it's
Uh-huh.
just such a needed resource. So thank you for doing this. So can't wait to see your podcast when they come out. So maybe it'll already be out by the time this one is shown. But anyway, excited and so glad that we live in proximity to each other and have been able to just, yeah, be a support to each other with what we're both doing, connecting other therapists. Anyway, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Judy. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay.